It's been a bit of a long day, but I'm home now. I'm so grateful to have my dad here, and I find myself just so emotional at times to see him so frail when he was so strong for so long.
China is battling a new and rapidly spreading respiratory virus.
The number of coronavirus cases.
1,000 cases of the coronavirus across Africa.
Coronavirus.
That deadly coronavirus outbreak has
Is the virus
In 2020, a previously unknown coronavirus emerged, leaving hundreds of thousands dead, overloading healthcare capacities, and sparking fear as scientists struggle to understand the behavior of the new virus. As the virus swept around the globe, nation after nation reluctantly went under lockdown in an effort to save lives and flatten the so-called curve.
The world is facing a medical emergency far graver than what we have experienced in over a century.
Nein, seit dem Zweiten Weltkrieg gab es keine Herausforderung an unser Land mehr.
The US, however, took a different approach.
Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. You know that.
This narrative was different, as the public health crisis soon signaled an upcoming economic crisis, which pundits predicted could be worse than the Great Depression. US leaders sought to downplay the severity of the situation in an effort to keep things normal.
So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
As it became clear just how bad the US situation was, the nation's leaders introduced new narratives to explain or perhaps justify why things are the way they are.
The utter collapse of the country's economy, if this goes on much longer, is an intolerable result.
Those of us who are 70 plus, we'll take care of ourselves, but don't sacrifice the country.
And now it's our time. We must sacrifice together because we are all in this together and we'll come through.
As the situation worsened, I set out to take a closer look at these narratives to find out how they were being wielded and toward what end. Today, I'll be looking at the US's unique narrative on sacrifice. How did the narrative on coronavirus change from protecting lives to sacrificing the most vulnerable to the disease, older adults?
And why is one of the wealthiest nations on Earth seemingly so okay with sacrificing older adults?
Age and ageism is a really strange type of othering because we all hope to eventually grow older.
Old?
Old.
Yet we still really other older people.
Years old. Okay, boomer.
We tend to think about older people as a them. That's a group of people that's not as productive, not as engaged. That othering then allows us to make policy decisions that are counterproductive, not just for that group, but for ourselves.
I don't want the whole country to be sacrificed.
He is saying, for his own part, that he'd be willing to take a risk to allow the economy to move forward, which seems to me to be an entirely reasonable viewpoint.
I think that's unethical to ask people to sacrifice themselves.
The first iteration of that was trying to care for older people, but that's quickly morphed. And at some point it became a thing of, well, we can't live with a shut down economy, and some people may have to be sacrificed. That's shifted quickly to older people would be willing to sacrifice themselves for the benefit of the economy.
And it has not just been the economy, as age critic Margaret Morgenroth-Goulet explains. From ventilators to protective gear, test kits and ICU beds, all of these have been in short supply ever since the health crisis started.
Scarcity creates hierarchies instead of the equality that we would think is desirable. When you have scarcity, the society or parts of the society look for scapegoats to start thinking about who is actually expendable.
Because what we have, I would say, is not just presumed scarcity, we have manufactured scarcity. We're actually aggressively promoting scarcity. And then we're actually telling a story to help people turn on each other. I think what we are scarce in right now is compassion. If we had compassion, we'd have enough equipment. We'd have enough hospital beds, and we'd be treating people differently.
It seems to be driven more by a more intense competitive capitalism, even a more intense focus on economic productivity that doesn't pair well with these narratives about decline as one ages.
So what has this meant for older adults even before the pandemic started?
We're seeing just a growing number of older people living in a very fragile state where they are just barely surviving. Many of them having to work into their late 70s.
This, of course, you notice more when there are recessions. And it's much harder in American capitalism to get another job. You could be unemployed for much longer. After 2008, the very long recession. And we are very likely to see that happening again.
There seems to be just a great inattention by policymakers to the evolving needs of this aging population.
The calculation by Trump and many of the right-wing Republicans is that if the economy is still closed, it will be harder for Trump to win re-election.
Aside from ageism, which some seem to want to use to their political gain, the pandemic exposed the country's prevailing inequalities along racial lines. The health crisis and the economic fallout has hit marginalized communities the hardest. So as crazy as this question might sound, but would you sacrifice yourself in order to save the American economy?
As a Black woman, why would I sacrifice myself for an economy that has never really been that kind to me? From housing to education, we've had to scrape, sacrifice. The economy was good to folks who had white privilege, and I ain't white, and I've never had privilege.
So what needs to change in order for you to feel taken care of?
Making sure that we have the right kind of medical care, education for older people so that we can, remain healthy, so I can stay in my home and so I can have someone take care of me.
And it's exactly what Luann Carlomagno did when her father got sick in April.
We're going on week 4 since my dad was first in the hospital with pneumonia. And he came home this Sunday, Mother's Day, and he's been living with us ever since. Hi, Papa. Are you going to make those eggs? All right, just checking. Love you. Love you.
One afternoon, as Luann was visiting her father, she noticed that he was not entirely himself, when a few moments later, he collapsed in front of her.
And we drove him to the ER. Once they took him in, I didn't see him for 3.5 days. They could see that he had some pneumonia in his lungs.
When you decided to take him home, was there a moment where you were like, well, maybe I could put him in a nursing home?
Never crossed my mind.
Seniors contribute to the economy in ways that might not be apparent at first glance. But for many, like the Carlomagno family, they are an intricate part of their household.
When my husband and I were first married 35 years ago, my parents did everything for us. My parents helped me raise my kids while my husband and I worked full time. And we always said, when the time comes, we're going to take care of Papa. I just get to give back to him for all those years he gave to us.
We're losing our commitments to taking care of older people when we open the economy too quickly.
And for some, that commitment is even sacred.
The beauty of the Navajo Nation masks the vengeance coronavirus has exacted on its people, even in the most remote places.
As it is, the Native population has already been decimated down to, nearly 2% of the population. And so when you take that into consideration, even a few deaths is a lot to our community. And over 65% of that death toll is their elders. They're the ones who hold this knowledge, and without them, it's not passed down. We have to fight to protect such treasured and sacred knowledge.
In light of this perfect storm, the coronavirus, the economy tanking, this uprise, we've been there. My generation learned some things from our parents and grandparents. We know how to shepherd you all through this.
How's it going to turn out? That depends on us. As I said, there's no one to come to rescue us. That depends on us, what we do.
Now it's our time. We must sacrifice together because we are all in this together. And
so I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.